there were times where I was like, you know what, I can't give a greater performance to a load of kids that may have paid a fiver to see me play versus Jesus, who gave everything for me on a Sunday morning.
Welcome into this next episode of Deconstructing Worship. Today we have the wonderful Matt Rusell. Yay!
What's up?
So, Matt, do you want to kind of just introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and you can kind of talk about worship, or you can talk about your favorite movie. I don't care. We just want to hear from you.
Amazing. I like that I've been invited to speak on a worship podcast, and I've just been told that you don't care if I talk about worship. So that's cool. My name's Matt. Hello everyone. It's awesome to be here. I'm a session drummer, or at least I was this time last year. It's been an interesting year, and I'm sure it comes up a lot on the podcast at the moment. I guess that's me in a nutshell. I'm a graphic designer by day and a session musician by night. That was kind of what I used to say, and it's been an exciting ride and continues to be exciting. And I'm married. I've been married for 9 years. This is my 10th wedding anniversary this coming December, which is really cool. Yeah, so that's really exciting. And I've got a 1-year-old boy called Levi who is amazing. And he is also learning to play drums, whether he realizes it or not. He's got these drumsticks that light up when you hit them, which is great incentive to practice, I think.
Amazing.
I don't know if you've ever tried that, Carl, with your students, but you should give it a go. So yeah, my little 1-year-old, he loves to hit everything at the moment. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, that's really cool, dude. It's like a little backstory of me and Matt. We met in drum tech, which is like a drum college, I guess, with other things as well. It was drum tech, but guitar X. That was another part of it, wasn't it? What was it?
Vocal tech.
But yeah, that was it. Vocal tech.
Actually, I remember we were getting towards graduation, and we built up such good relationships. We're like, we should start a band, and we were like, well, we're all drummers. I mean, how successful will that be, really? But the school isn't there anymore. It doesn't exist in the same form.
So yeah, obviously, we met at Drum Tech, and I tell people this story all the time because I think it's amazing. For me, kind of going down to London, being not from Wales, but I grew up in Wales, and then I was so nervous to kind of be moving down to London, and obviously I had my now wife but girlfriend at the time, and I didn't want to leave her. I had all the kind of teenage emotions of no, I can't leave. And I was so nervous to move. I'd never lived anywhere by myself before, obviously. Kind of the normal kind of things that everyone goes through when they move away. And I remember being in the queue for enrollment, and we're kind of going in the door, and there's this dude in front of me and this guy behind me, and we just get chatting as you do with the people in your nearest vicinity. And the guy in front of me was Matt, and the dude behind me was Paul, which is another guy that, do you remember this?
I vaguely remember this, yeah.
Yeah, so Paul is another really great friend that I made at Drum Tech, and didn't know at the time, but turned out to be that me, Matt, and Paul were the only Christians in our year. And we were just 3 guys stood next to each other. And I was for me, I don't know if you needed that, but I really needed that. I felt like I was moving to be by myself. I was and then God gave me 2 Jesus followers right next to me in this line. And I was okay, thank you, Jesus. So yeah, that sticked in my memory for so many years, bro.
Yeah, I remember that as well. And I remember I remember thinking, like, I look back on that and think how significant that was, to be honest, because at the time I'd already moved out. I moved out of my home when I was like 18 or whatever, and I moved back in with my parents to then come to Drum Tech.
Yeah.
And it meant that I was moving away from my church at the time, and so it's quite a daunting thing, really, to have moved out, be independent, be part of a church, and be actively involved, to then kind of leave that behind for a year, not really knowing what to expect. And getting to know you and Paul was amazing. And how many years ago was that now? It must have been
was it 2005?
2005.
Yeah. It's a long time ago.
So yeah. And what's amazing is we're still mates. We still catch up at least, once a year, which is cool. And Paul's a pastor now, which is amazing.
Man.
So
it's great because like obviously you're musicians, and then Paul ended up transitioning to pastor and stuff like that. I spoke to Paul to see if he's interested in being on the podcast as well. So he's looking to go like season 3. So.
Season 3, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Been astonishingly, bewilderingly popular. But like me and Carl have said before, we think it's just because this is quite a timely conversation to be having, rather than because it's a particularly amazing idea on our part. Like people are just so hungry to talk about this.
So I have told you already, but so we're going to like dive into some questions. I kind of like pre-gave them to you, but only yesterday, so you didn't have too much time to kind of like write an essay, which I know you didn't. So question 1 that we just kind of like will roll from here and see where the conversation goes. Can you remember like your first experience of like congregational worship?
Yeah, so there's a couple of memories that really stick out, and I think the first one, and I was thinking about this earlier, and I'm not hoping, but I'm wondering if there might be a theme that kind of runs across your episodes. But one of my earliest memories actually led to me becoming a Christian, which I think is one of the most powerful things that can happen, that can take place during worship. But I remember that, and that was when I was about 8 years old, and it was at Spring Harvest, I believe, and my dad was one of the worship leaders, and so I was exposed to contemporary worship and church and everything from the age of 0. And I remember experiencing that environment, which is, if you've ever been to Spring Harvest, when you're 8 years old, it's like, it's epic, it's really cool. And I remember being in this environment and just thinking, I think the focus was it was quite missional. And I remember feeling like, man, I want to change the world, and the only way I could do that is if I become a Christian. And that was kind of it. That whole environment, that whole moment kind of led to that. So that, I guess, was my earliest memory. And then one of the most significant memories, when I think I must have been 12 or 13, and I just started playing the drums. And my dad was leading worship, and I was in the congregation with my mum and my sister, and I was just watching my dad lead. And my dad is and still is a very passionate, fiery worship leader, and will give everything he's got to lead worship. And I always found that really inspiring. But I don't know about you guys. Steve, you play guitar, right? Is that right? So I don't know about you guys, but for me, I was naturally drawn to the drummer because that's the instrument I'd started to play. So I was watching my dad lead worship, and he's given it everything he's got. And as I started to learn drums, like for me, everything I listened to, the drums are always louder. Like I was more interested in that, and I was just kind of drawn to it. And so I'm watching my dad lead, and then my eyes like drifting to see what the drummer's doing, and the guy. it looked like someone had killed his cat like the few moments before he got up and played or something. I'd never seen anyone look so miserable.
No.
And I was so confused. I was so confused because I was like, here's one guy giving everything he got in worship, in how he played and led the congregation, and then the drummer who, like, from my perspective, I'm like, you know, there's got to be, this is a powerful instrument, there's you know, why does something so fast and loud look so boring? That's what kind of caused this journey for me, to understand what it really looked like to worship God on drums passionately, because I could see it in other musicians and other artists, so why not drums? And so that was the journey that I kind of went on, and that was a real significant moment, I think. Certainly one of my earliest memories when it came to worship and drums in church and all that sort of stuff. And like I said, Carl, like I was pursuing, I guess, the opportunity to play, whether it be in church or with various artists or bands or whatever it might be. So I guess it kind of all stemmed from that point.
That's awesome. What was that band that you did it for quite a while? After Party, was that it?
Yeah, so the After Party was, I guess that was my last like proper band that I was in. Is that the one you mean, or do you mean, because there were two kind of bands that I was in. One was straight after Drum Tech, which one
was that one?
Ghosts on Pegasus Bridge.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Was that the one you were talking about?
No, I was talking about After Party, but I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So then a few years later, I joined the After Party. But yeah, the After Party was flipping love that band so much. I still do, and every now and again, I'm like, "Hey guys, reunion? What are you saying?" And they just ignore me whenever I send that message. It's a great conversation killer, actually.
Hey, never say never though, because like my hardcore band, we got together summer 2019 to play together, and that was the first time we played together in 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we first got together when we all lived in Coventry. We had all at different times studied at the Nexus, the Christian Music College. And then I moved to Cardiff to study script writing. Josh, the drummer, moved to Brighton, and Davey stayed in Coventry. And that's where we all still are now. And we've just somehow made remote recording work, you know, and we managed to actually get together and jam out some stuff. And like, you know, like a decade later. So, you know, who knows? Maybe the season will come around again.
So Ghosts on Pegasus Bridge, the band that I joined when I left Drum Tech, was it was a metal band basically, with I guess more clean vocals than the screaming stuff, but there was an element of screaming in there. I mean, actually, that band was awesome. I really learned how to play drums after learning how to play drums at Drum Tech. I really learned how to play because I joined, and then I mean, I'll tell you the story briefly if we've got time.
No, do it.
I got invited to be in this band. I knew the singer quite well, and he really wanted me to join, and I really didn't want to join the band. I wasn't really a big fan of the music. I wasn't a massive fan of metal, to be honest. I sort of grew up listening to punk and punk rock and that kind of thing. That was sort of my jam. And but they convinced me to come and audition, and it was super fun, just like going wild, basically. And it was all quite complicated, quite techy, and there was a lot of double pedal involved, which I'd never really done before either, so I had to sort of learn how to do that. But the reason I joined was because they managed to get a tour with a band which was up and coming at the time called You Me at Six, and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to like finish college and go straight on tour. That sounds great. So that's what I did. So I literally joined the band and went straight on tour. I think I played a few smaller shows here and there, but it was just my first proper tour, and it was just chaos. We bought a little like 2-man caravan, and we gutted
I remember
it.
that caravan.
Do you remember? You came to the last gig that we did, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
it was
was
like you and
really
me at 6 in this like tiny little pub, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, there were many lessons learned from that tour. For me, that show in particular, Carl, because you filmed it. I don't know if you remember this. You filmed it and played it back to me, and I was like, I need to change some of my attitudes and habits before playing, because I'm not as good as I think I am. But that tour was mental. We had this stupid little caravan, which when we were on tour spent every day in Halfords, because we had to try and repair it because like walls were falling off and windows were breaking. But it was incredible to do this tour and get to know the guys in Unit 6, and literally when that tour finished, they jumped on a support slot for Paramore at Wembley, and then their album came out. And if you know the story of Unit 6, they're huge now and really successful, doing some great stuff. And so that was kind of why I joined, and then I stayed, and we signed to an independent, which was cool. And so many dreams you have as a kid were sort of coming true in that moment, being signed to an independent, touring, having merch, like all that sort of stuff. So it was great. I mean, it didn't end particularly well for me, and I sort of vowed never to play music again when I finally left. I think I was in the band for about 3.5 years, I think it was. And I was just, I think I was probably a little bit disillusioned and sort of heartbroken by the fact that I guess the dreams I had weren't a reality,
Okay.
And it wasn't how I thought things were going to pan out. So that was the sort of Ghost. That was kind of the metal-y sort of thing. And then the after party was, I guess, formed from that with a few different members a few years down the road. And I obviously I'd vowed never to play music again, and they had a different drummer when they started. And it's interesting because I was dating Lydia, my now wife, at the time, and we then got married. And it was on my honeymoon that I actually felt like I heard God really clearly to say, get back into music.
Nice. And
I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, when people get married, they don't usually start a music career. They usually finish it. And that'd be my experience. That's what I'd seen. So I was like, this is odd. But we talked about it, and she was like, yeah, you should definitely explore it. And we sort of talked about some ideas, and I was like, well, maybe it means I'll be playing at church more, or maybe it means I'll do the function thing, or I don't really know. But I have a desire to really play again, and all that sort of thing. And she's like, well, what would the ideal be? And I said to her, and honestly, this is amazing. I said to her that what would be great is, I got a call from Leo, who was managing the after party, just to say, things aren't really working out with the drummer, and we'd love to audition you and come and be a part of it. And I was like, that'd be really cool. Anyway, we get back from our honeymoon, and I kid you not, the next day I got a call from Leo saying, hey man, it's not really working out with the drummer. Wondering if you'd be up for coming for an audition. And I was like, one moment, please. You won't believe this. And I was like, yeah, it'd be great to see Nick, who is the singer, again, because I hadn't seen him since Ghost, and I didn't really know the other guys. So we met in this grotty little rehearsal studio. How I missed those. And just played through the songs, and then they invited me to be part of the band. And man, it was humbling. It to be given that opportunity again. I think I always grew up thinking that there's like a shelf life on that kind of scene and doing that sort of thing. And the sort of music they were playing was kind of like pop rock. So I was like well in my zone, because it meant that the songs were a little bit simpler, which meant I could really focus on like a performance element, which I always felt like was something that I could really bring to the table. So, and I think Carl, you saw the after party play.
Yeah, man.
At some point.
Yeah.
So hopefully you enjoyed that. I mean,
oh, bro, like, I always
spot, but
no. Like I remember, like, so we had this conversation in like a previous episode talking about performance. And kind of like what that means within a worship sense and things like that, and like saying that like in the kind of like in the Christian world, the word performance is really stigmatized.
Sure, yeah.
But like I always remember, like even when we were in drum tech, like dude, like your performance was like amazing, like that. Like I always really enjoyed not only like hearing you play, but like watching you play, and that's something that like I had to really learn because I'm quite introverted. So like for me, like. I to like show myself up and big, especially when I was younger, was really difficult. So like you inspired me, bro, which is amazing.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. I didn't know that. Yeah, the performance thing's really interesting because again, if I come back to that defining moment where I looked at my dad and he was really going for it, and then I looked at the drummer and I was like, I don't understand why his expression isn't reflective of, I guess, the revelation that at least I had. You know, and I get everyone's on a different journey, and that's totally cool. I'm not judging the guy. It's just when I was that age, when I was 12 or whatever, I was like, there's got to be more to this. There's got to be a way that we can do. And I had to learn like the fine line between, I guess, a performance which was about me versus a performance which is all about God. And it is a really fine line. You know, spinning your sticks in church, I realized is not cool.
But it should be.
You know what? I tell you what. There was one time there were some people that really egged me on to do it, which you know, many questions can be raised about that. But but there was something about the energy that you brought, and what I've learned, I think, is that when you're on that platform, you're giving people permission to express themselves in a specific way. So if you're going to stand there and look bored, why would you expect anything else from the congregation? Whereas if you're going to lay it on the table and give it your all and just let go of kind of what people might be thinking of you, then who knows? Maybe that will inspire someone else to do the same. And I think that's really important. But I guess, you know, maybe my line is different to someone else's line when it comes to this sort of thing. But certainly that's what I've come to understand and try to get right. It's about I guess inspiring people to really let go. I guess it's like King David when he was like he took off all his clothes and he was just down to your pants, isn't it? For God, it's the same kind of thing, but you know, keeping your clothes on and hitting drums.
most of the time.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I guess I want to respond to about what you said there. First of all, like God's timing is so interesting because I went into a full-time career as you know, a session musician the same time I started being a full-time dad. And again, you know, that's not what happens, is it, in the music world? Like when you have kids, then your life is over and you stop doing all creative things and you know, and so it's fascinating there that that we've both kind of had that kind of, you know, like God's timing is not our timing, and what kind of mold that we have, what path we might kind of foresee for a music career is not necessarily the path that he has for us, and nothing can stand in the way of that. And I love that you kind of pulled on the example of David, because like we kind of use this phrase reckless abandon when it comes to worship, and that's very much what David did. And I think what we talked about in terms of performance is actually it's episode 1 that, you know, that at time of recording came out today. Like it depends how you define performance, doesn't it? Because every worship musician would define it differently. But I'm from a performance background too. Like I was in a theatre company growing up. I studied drama at university. I've been in a number of bands over the years. And to my mind, performance is a meaningful act of collective connection, which is what the corporate worship experience is supposed to be. I mean, so I think it's like, Yeah, and I think, it's like what kind of serves that goal, I think, is like kind of like where I kind of, but like you say, everyone's got their lines in different places. But but did you ever find out, by the way, did you, because obviously he was your dad's drummer, did you ever find out why he looked so unhappy?
No, I didn't. I can't even remember who it was. I mean, he was much older than me, and yeah, he could be listening to this right now and be like banging on my door, like, you don't know what happened. And it's true, I don't know what happened, and there's certainly lessons to learn from that, and to be aware of those different things. When because I guess like everyone comes to church with some kind of baggage. No one turns up perfect unless their name is Jesus. So it's, I guess it's unfair really to accuse anyone of anything in that circumstance. I would love to know for sure if it was even on his radar, or maybe he didn't know that it was okay to go a little bit harder or be a bit more expressive or whatever. It was a long time ago, and I guess music certainly in church has kind of developed and evolved so much, even in the last 10 years, let alone 20 something years. So yeah, it's a great question though, and maybe I should change how I tell that story so I sound less like I'm picking on the guy. One of the things I've had to learn over the years is to just remain teachable, because if you don't remain humble, you will be humbled, and that's not always not always that fun. But I remember there was it was actually when I was in Ghosts, and I was so I'd finished drum tech, and I was in this band, and I'd moved back to my hometown, and I was back involved with my church, and it was great. And there was only 2 drummers in the church, so we were doing double shifts pretty much, which was cool. I loved it, but I was also then going on tour and playing loads. And I remember this time we played a hometown show. The band was from Southampton, so we played at the Joiners in Southampton, which is an awesome venue if you ever get to go there. And it was an epic show, and I remember just like walking away from that going, man, what a great night, like and the thing was, I was the only Christian in the band, so I was like, man, what a great night, God, you were really honored in this moment. And I felt like I was saying, was I? And I was like, yeah. And then the next Sunday, I was playing at church. I think the tour had finished, and then I was like straight on it on a Sunday morning, and I did my thing, but ultimately went through the motions, and I felt like God was kind of recalling that moment, and I felt like God was saying, okay, what's the deal here? Because you're saying that you were sort of honoring me or worshiping me in that moment, but then when it came to on Sunday, you were just kind of going through the motions. And I felt like I was saying, what like, why, what's the difference? Like, what did it cost the people to be at the gig? And I was like, well, they maybe paid like £5 for a ticket, and maybe bought a t-shirt, and I don't know, they maybe bought a CD, because that was a thing even back then. And I felt like I was saying, right, so they paid maybe £10. And it's like, well, what about Jesus? What did he pay? And I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Wow, yeah,
and it suddenly just shifted for me. And in that moment, there were times where I was like, you know what, I can't give a greater performance to a load of kids that may have paid a £5 to see me play versus Jesus, who gave everything for me on a Sunday morning. Why should the Sunday morning expression of my worship be less than what I'm giving out at these gigs? And I was really challenged by that, and so I shifted that mindset. And there were times then after that, there were Sunday mornings where I was going harder and louder and faster and more ferocious on a Sunday than I was with my metal band. And they were awesome moments, and but that moment stayed with me forever, and I'm very conscious of what that looks like, and that really helped define, I guess, the line between performance which is worthy of a king versus what is worthy of a punter, you know.
That's something that I was actually gonna ask you. Like, obviously, like we're all kind of involved in kind of like sessioning and things like that. Like you've had like a lot of experience with that. Like, just how would you define? I know you have kind of briefly already, but like the experience of being involved in like a worship scene compared to like a non-worship scene.
It's a good question. So I've really only been involved in the worship scene, as it were, in the last sort of few years. Actually, since I started doing session work in a, I guess, almost full-time capacity. Before that, my only real experience was, I guess, the local church, my home church, which was cool, and I love all of that. But my heart was very much like the secular scene. I was all about like the punk scene and those kind of kids, I guess, because I grew up like a punk kid. I grew up a skater and all that sort of stuff, and I had a real passion for them, and I only ever wanted to be in a position to inspire. That was my thing, and so I pursued that hard for most of my life, I guess, and I still do to an extent. It just it looks very different, and I mean, 35-year-olds are only so cool, you know, when it comes to playing punk rock music with a bunch of 18-year-old bands.
Bro, I'm gonna give you a bit of shameless plug-in for your clothing line. But what's that tagline you've got on one of your tops, though?
Oh yeah, forever dead cool. That's it,
man.
That's it. It's true. Well, I like to think so. I know that at some point my son will prove me wrong, but he's not there yet, so we're okay. But yeah, so that was my heart was for that scene, and I honestly never thought I'd be playing beyond my local church. But interestingly, there was a dude that came to my church who I got to know kind of quite well, and he was a legend, and he was actually a singer that toured with all kinds of different Christian artists, including Matt Rusell, and he and his wife were involved in a conference. And one day, just out of the blue, actually, again, God's timing was amazing. So the after party had just finished. We were just about to play our last show, and I was coming back from something, and I randomly got a text from my mate saying, "Hey, we've got a conference happening in November, but we need a drummer. Just wondering if you'd be up for playing for one of our guys."
Okay.
And I was like, "Wow, yeah, like that'd be amazing. Like I'm going to be totally free because my band is just finished, and so I'm not going to be doing anything. It'd be great to do it." So he was like, "Okay, cool. You're going to be playing for this guy called Chris." And I was like, "Okay, sweet." So he then sent me through the songs, and I started doing a bit of research on who it was I was playing for. And his full name is Chris McClarney. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Oh yeah! Oh wow! Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I hadn't heard of him. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'm like researching him and finding out, and I'm like, oh, cool. He's part of Jesus culture, and he's like written some like real like worship bangers,
Yeah, he's got some bangers.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. So I started like learning these songs. And then I went to the conference and played for him, and I was probably average at best. It was such a different environment to what I was used to, because my home church at the time, we weren't using clicks or tracks or anything like that. It was pretty free, pretty wild. And so my only real experience of clicks and tracks was in the after party, which we only really brought in the last kind of year. So it was completely different environment. We didn't get to rehearse with him because his flight was delayed, and I'm with a bunch of other session musicians who are like top of their game good.
Yeah.
And I was just like, whoa, this is wild. And then we're in this massive theatre, you know, and it's got all the lights and the staging and everything, and the sound engineers are like world class, and I'm just like, this is so epic. And you know, I play drums, and you know, it definitely wasn't my best performance in terms of being able to deliver the songs exactly how they were written. Because I had no idea how it should be. I don't know if I wasn't sure if I should interpret it how I think it should be played, or if I should be playing exactly what the drummer wrote and all that sort of thing. And I was well nervous. But that was kind of my first taste of, I guess, the worship scene outside of my church. And after that, I was like, man, that was awesome. Like, I loved being able to do that. It was a real eye-opener. But I thought, you know what, if that was just a one-off, like, thank you, God, for that opportunity, because that was great. And then they invited me back like the following year, and I was like, no way.
Yeah,
that's weird.
Nice.
They were like, but hey, do you want to be part of the like the house band? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. That'd be great. So I was like now playing for like 4 or 5 different artists, and I was like, okay, wow, that's a lot of songs that I've now got to figure out. And so that conference came along, and I think I got to play for Chris again. So I was like, right, this time I'm going to get it.
This time, I'm doing it this time.
You know, and that was really cool. And I met some other amazing worship leaders, and then I thought, you know what? I mean, that was amazing. Like, thank you, God. If that was it, you know, like I'm you know, I'm happy. This is amazing. And then they invited me back another like for a 3rd year, and I was like, wow, this is mental. And I think I've done it now 5 or 6 years. And it really kind of started to show me that being a session musician was a viable option, I guess, for me in terms of a career, because I started to learn how to learn songs like quickly, and to do lots of different genres. There was one of the conferences I played, I think I played for all but maybe 2 artists, but they all brought a different style. One of them was like really folky, really stripped back, didn't use in-ears. It was all like floor monitors. There were no clicks, nothing. And then the guy after him was like multiple tracks, like 100 keyboards. There was clicks, cues, DMs. Like, it was like completely, you know, all the like completely different vibe. But it just kind of showed me that there was that this was something I could actually do. And I just fell in love with that community, and I fell in love with I guess the expression of church outside of what I was familiar with in terms of my local church. It was kind of the church on a wider level, yeah, it was just a phenomenal experience. And I'm really sorry I can't remember the question, but I hope you enjoyed that.
That was great. The second question that we ask our guests is, you know, and we realize this is quite a difficult thing to narrow down, but second question, what is your favorite thing about congregational worship?
I think there is incredible power in a unified voice. And I think we need that more now than ever. There was a time during the lockdown, I think last year, where, because I haven't played in church since, or any church setting since March last year, some of the guys I know were doing this like a sort of unplugged live worship stream in someone's back garden in the summer, and they asked me to come and play cajon, and which was really cool. And I think by this point it's the first time we'd been together in like 6 months or something, so it was really special to see each other. There was no congregation there, but there was maybe 4 or 5 of us, so you know, that kind of counts. But it started raining, and it was on paper it was miserable. Like, it was a miserable experience. You know, you're being rained on, you know, the internet's not working properly, the live stream's not working properly, all that sort of thing. I think we did one song before we had to call it a day, and everything's getting drenched. But then we were sort of reviewing it, and what I recognized in that moment was when other people engage with God, with the gifts that they've given them, that really blesses me. And so I felt the love of God and the presence of God in that moment, not because of anything that I was doing, but because other people were sacrificing their time and everything to bring what they have to God, and it just really blessed me. And I think that is one of the things I love most about it, when we're all together as a church and there's a unified voice, which is speaking out truth, no matter how good you are at singing or whatever it is. It's something that really blesses my heart and so many other people around us, I guess. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, like I love just at the beginning when you just said, and it felt so heartfelt when you were like we need this now more than ever. Like that was because we do. Like I think no matter kind of what we're going through as a country or as the world or individual, like we're made relational beings, aren't we? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think you're so right, dude. Like just that one voice together is so powerful. Like you said, like people sacrificing their time and just giving into this kind of one common goal is amazing. Like that's really cool.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we're gonna see God move in a beautiful way when the doors open again, because church, what we knew before lockdown, I don't believe exists anymore. What we're going to be going into is going to be something completely fresh and new and exciting, and I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
And I think what is really significant about what you guys are doing is everyone's been forced into a position where they've got to deconstruct what they once knew, or the learnt behaviors that we've carried through our time as Christians or church leaders or whatever. And it's great. We need to take note of those things, because I think God's in it. I think he's calling us to put down a lot of the stuff that we've brought into church, which was never supposed to be there in the first place. And I'm excited for what that looks like. I'm also terrified of what that looks like. It might mean that I never play drums in church again. But you know what? I'm cool with that. I'm totally cool with that. So yeah.
That's awesome. We've had many a discussion, and even me and you, Steve, just about kind of, okay, church doesn't look anything like what it used to. But is that such a bad thing? Like what you're saying, we brought so many things in that maybe shouldn't have been there in the first place, and it is a really exciting time of going, okay, what was important? Were we doing any of the things that were important in the first place? And kind of going, okay, like you said, if I never play drums again in church, does that really matter? Are we as musicians who are involved in worship, are we going for that, or are we going for that community of Jesus followers? It really makes you think of, okay, why do I go to church? Like, why? When all of that stops and you're told no, you can't anymore, it's like, okay, what do I miss? Like me and Helen had this conversation. We were like 4 or 5 months in, when you're starting to miss people, and it was like, well, okay, what do we actually miss about church? And it was kind of scary, because I was like, you know what? Not much. And that was like, ooh, hello. I missed outside of relationships. Nothing really. I missed the communal kind of togetherness of church. I missed that communal worship. It all boils down to that relationship, and the function, the way things are run. I didn't miss it really, and I was like, wow, I didn't expect that at all. Yeah. Okay, so I like that I get to ask this questions. Okay, so we like this one because this one kind of gets a bit heavy hitting, which is nice. Okay. If you could change anything about the kind of current culture of congregational worship, what would you like to see changed?
I guess there could be a whole load of practical things. When I was thinking about this question today, and there were just two things that sort of came to mind immediately, and I really hope it's still on topic and it and it sparks a conversation. This could be a really short answer, or it could be really long. But I think that there were two things that came up. The first one was to see a change in worship culture. I'd like to see the ability to love each other better. The second thing was to hear a voice or hear a sound that better represents who you are as a community. And I kind of unpack that second one first. What I mean is Hillsong are amazing at being Hillsong, and Elevation Church are amazing at being Elevation Church. And I love both those churches, and I've got friends at both those churches, and they do incredible things. But the little church in the village down the road doesn't need to sound like that. They need to sound like the church that represents that community. And it's a trap and a learnt behavior that I think everyone's fallen into. And some are great at breaking out, obviously, because Hillsong are an example of what it sounds like to do what they do and do it well. And we should be inspired by how these churches operate and what they do, and we should be inspired by the songs that they write and the sounds that they explore and all that sort of thing. But we don't have to be a carbon copy. If it works for your church, great. But my desire is to see, hear, experience something that really reflects the people that the church is there to serve, and to reflect the cultures that make up the community. And I think that I've been able to see a little bit of that already, or I've been able to explore a little bit of that with the guys that I've played for in my church. And I know that's something that they are passionate about is the cultures being well represented, or at least inspiring the sound and the rhythms and all that sort of thing. I love all of that. And then the second point, or the first point, is the ability to love each other better. And I think what I mean by this is, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but when there have been times over the years where I've played on a Sunday morning and received just a lot of backlash for various different things, usually because it's too loud. That's the most most frequent thing. But I've had all kinds of stuff over the years. I mean, I've got in trouble for wearing a hat, which I have no idea what that had to do with worship, but that's what I got picked up on. There's been times. There's this one time. So like when I was growing up, when I was good enough to play in church, I got to play drums for my dad when he was leading, which was amazing.
Awesome.
But there was a time like when someone came up to me and my dad and was like, I came here to worship God, not to have a party. And I was just like,
what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Like, if heaven's not going to be a party, then I mean, I don't know. Like, it's been all kinds of stuff like that, and that's probably another conversation for another podcast. But there's things like that. But also on the flip side, when it comes to encouragement and saying, hey, what you did, that was really great. Now, at the time, that can seem really good. But what happens the following week when they're playing and you don't say that? What happens then? Are they like, did I not do a good job this week? And then all of a sudden it becomes not about them serving or even worshiping God. It's trying to please man and get that attention and that affection. And I think we need to learn to love our our teams better in that way. But equally, our teams need to learn how to love and serve our congregations better. And again, I've been in environments where it gets frustrating when the congregation doesn't seem to be on the same page as the band, or aren't responding in a specific way. And that frustration can really overtake a little bit. But then it's remembering that, people are coming into church with all kinds of different baggage and experiences, and we just don't know. And I think how we worship together and how we have that unified voice will be a reflection on how we love each other, and how we're willing to lay ourselves down for each other. And can you imagine how our approach to the throne room will be when we're putting everyone else first, that's kind of the two things that I am. They're the two things that I'm wanting to see in my life. That's what I'm pursuing. And I'm sure, other people are going to be pursuing other things, but they're the two things I really want to get right. I want to love people better. And I want to encourage and, represent that community and that culture better. And I want that to, inspire, how I worship.
I wonder if the two things you've said could be kind of almost crystallized in the idea of kind of having a consumerist attitude to worship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the people who, have, who have, I came here to worship Jesus, not to have a party, clearly had a product in mind that they were coming to experience.
Mm.
And okay, here's my question then. Are we kind of, by emulating the big kind of worship teams, are we doing ourselves a disservice by basically giving ourselves a product to be compared to? As in, if we kind of create worship music, or even a sound of worship, you could even do the Hillsong or Elevation songs, but in whatever style springs most naturally out of your congregation, right? But are we kind of, does it perhaps open that door for criticism from people who are consumers if they're like, well, they didn't play it as well as Elevation, did they? Or they didn't play it as well as Hillsong. Are we perhaps, are we, by emulating those big worship teams, are we perhaps creating a rod for our own back?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I think there's a couple of things that I would want to separate. And that's, the first thing is that worship isn't a style of music. So that'd be the first thing that I think people need to understand, that it's not a genre that you buy.
It's kind of sadly become one though, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is one of the challenges that we face moving forward. And then on the flip side, when it comes to emulating what some of the bigger churches do, I actually think it's a great thing to do in practice. And I am for click tracks and guides and big bands. I love that sort of thing. I'm also for stripping everything back, having one acoustic guitar, snare kick, and a djembe, and just saying, okay, God, this is what we've got this morning. You do your thing. And I love that as well. And I think there's room for both. And this is the beauty of the church, is that there are so many different expressions that if someone's like, well, it's not as good as Hillsong, well, that's okay. Hillsong's down the road. Why don't you go there? That's totally cool. And I think we have to be okay with not being everyone's cup of tea, as it were. So that would be my two kind of thoughts on that, really. When it comes to emulating, I think it's a great tool, because for a drummer to be able to play to a click, it's incredibly good practice. I'm guessing, Carl, you do this with your students. Yeah. It's really, really important to be able to do that. And it brings about discipline. And again, if people are taught why we do what we do, then there's no issue with it. It's when people have no idea why we do what we do, where the problems arise.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I love what you said there of using that kind of what they're producing as a tool in your practice is amazing. Definitely.
Yeah.
And then like, I love the sentiment of like bringing it home and going, okay, what does our culture look like for this community? Like we were talking about this in episode 2 with Davey, and just talking about how sometimes even like as like, trying to make like the most inclusive music possible and kind of creating this, like I love Steve coined the term spacey rock, like even trying to do that in itself is not inclusive. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like it's about, I love that, dude, like taking it to your community. Okay, what does worship look like for these bunch of people? And I think that's amazing.
I think playing exactly to track as well, there's something you could be a slave to, but I think what you're right is that I think a lot of churches stop there, but it has to be a jumping off point, because like you say, I learned so much from times I've just sat down and transcribed the daylights out of an elevation worship song, and I've learned stuff from transcribing songs and learning them by rote to track. Like the discipline of that is awesome, and I've learned so much from that I've kind of taken into other playing, other like songwriting and things like that. But I think it has to be a jumping off point, doesn't it? It has to be like you say, a tool like that we then kind of put ourselves on top of, because the kind of other flip side of it, which I was definitely guilty of when I first started playing to the church I'm currently at. Is you end up being a bit lazy, and you kind of go like, well, like I'm sure there's a really good guitar part for this one, or a really good hook, but I've got the chord chart and I can just make something up. You know what I mean? There's kind of got to be, Sorry?
I've definitely been there. Like, you've got the kind of holy drum beat. Like Matt, you know this one. It's the dum dum, leave some space. Dum dum, like that's in like I'd say 90% of most kind of Christian music, and like kind of like you said there, I think because of that, and like it's all on me as well. Like I'm not blaming that, but like you can get caught up in the like, oh, I haven't had time to practice this week, so like I'll be fine. Like I'll play the holy beat. Like it'd be right. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, carry on, bud.
Well, I think as you guys were talking, I was just kind of remembering all the dumb things I've done. But one thing that I found is one of those humbling experiences, I guess, was being in a position where you have to learn the track exactly as it is. So when I've played this worship conference, having like not met some of the worship leaders before, and not knowing their kind of playing style or how they approach the music, I have no idea like if they want me to do exactly as what's written, or if they want me to just vibe it or whatever. Sometimes I don't even know if they're going to be running clicks, or I played for a worship leader who basically ignored the house band and just did his thing, and we just had to keep up, and that was cool.
That's cool.
But in those environments, like if I knew that beforehand, would I still put the work in to prep for like his set, And if I didn't, is that loving and honoring to that worship leader and the congregation that he's going to be leading? Am I then leading against him, or am I leading with him? And so there's all these questions. And so when it came to learning songs exactly as per the track, there was one moment where I remember listening to a song thinking, oh, this beat is just boring and I've got to play it for 9 minutes. What's that about? And so I'm like, I'm sure I can make this more interesting. And I'm in the studio playing away, and I'm writing my own parts. I'm like, yes, this sounds great. I am absolutely killing it. And then I recorded it and I listened to it back, and I was like, yep, I understand why they did the drums the way they did, because this is just, it was just so busy and there was so much going on, and it just took away like the point of the song, and sometimes the most, sometimes the loudest thing you can play as a drummer is just putting your sticks down and just letting go.
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of learn that and embrace, I guess, what had been written, because it'd been written for a purpose. It wasn't like this guy went on Ableton and just like laid out some loops and thought, yeah, that'd do. Like when you're writing a song, and maybe I'm speculating a little bit, but it's not like they have an idea and they just write it down and that's that. Like, God is part of the process. And I've got to believe that God is part of the process with the drummers when they're recording and they're playing their parts as well, which means it's inspired, which means like I want to get some of that inspiration, and I want to understand what it's like. And I find it really hard to play the songs exactly as they're written. It's something I'd never really got good at, even when Carl and I were at college and we had our live performance things and we had to do the songs exactly how they were. Like, I have no problem performing and playing these songs, but to do it exactly as it's written, like, it messes me up. Like, I really struggle with it. So I've really had to like push past that. And the reason I do it is because again, I want to be where those drummers are, but I want to be able to serve the worship leaders the best way that I can. And if I get that if I learn that and they're like, hey man, I just want you to be free, then I've got this as well as everything else to play with,
That's fab.
And again, I think it's an amazing tool. So imagine in your local churches, you're like, okay, I'm going to learn this exactly how it is. And then when it comes to it, if we're going off on one, at least I know how to either bring it back or take it in a new direction or whatever. A friend of mine, phenomenal musician, he would, when it came to learning a song for Sunday, he would learn the version that he was sent, and then he would find as many versions as he could of the song, and he would learn all of those as well, just in case.
Oh, what a great way. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. When he told me that, I was like, man, I thought I worked hard. I don't work like this guy. When it comes to prepping for worship and playing in that environment, he's like, I need to find as many versions as I can so that if God says go in that direction, I'm ready, And I think that's the cool thing that we can take away from some of the bigger bands, the bigger productions. It's cool to be able to play to click, but know when to turn it off, And it goes the other way. It's cool to like not be able to play to a click, but know when to turn it on,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it's kind of like not kind of idolizing either, isn't it? Because I think like we can jump on that side of like all that big production stuff, like it's like it's the devil, and we can do the opposite as well. So I remember being in this team once upon a time where someone came up from a larger church. I won't name names, but and she was kind of giving our worship team a bit of a pep talk, and it was all lovely, and she was really nice and really friendly, and we all got on really well. But she started talking about how it's our job to frame the gospel. And saying that like the lights and the smoke and the drums and the production is like, and she gave this analogy of, imagine you've got this beautiful painting by, I don't know, Renoir or Monet or whoever, and if that painting is like kind of in like an alleyway, like no one's gonna notice it, but if we can put it in a beautiful frame, then it's gonna make it like more attractive to people. And I was like, I had a real issue with that. Like, I kind of get what she was saying to an extent, but to me, it was like, we can't make the gospel more beautiful. And sometimes putting more on it actually detracts from the gospel. And so like you can see it in both ways. Like, it can be kind of demonized to have this big production, because like definitely it's a tool and it's amazing, and like I'm involved with these things sometimes, and if we see it as a tool, it's beautiful, and it's demonized on the other way as well. So I love hearing you talk about that, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think what I've just realized is what we're talking about today is very reminiscent of what we knew of church and what we knew of our worship experience from this time last year, basically. So it's going to be really interesting to see, if we still stand by some of our views or opinions or our experiences, this time next year. And actually, I think that's an important point, that we worship a living God who he remains the same, but we're sort of ever changing, and cultures are changing and all that sort of thing. And so are we bringing too many things are we overcomplicating what is a very simple act of worship? I don't know, maybe that's something that we will be addressing as the church globally when we go back, like what things are irrelevant, what things shouldn't have been there. And like I said, I'm for like big productions, and I'm for the smaller thing, and I think lighting teams and all that sort of stuff, it's a great way that they can express their worship, for sure. But on the flip side, not every church has people like that, and so should they be made to feel like less relevant or insignificant? Absolutely not. It's kind of like let's champion and celebrate every expression of God's church, however that looks. I'm probably rambling a little bit, but
no, I get it. Like, I genuinely, I think that's a really lovely place to kind of finish the podcast. Like, I think that's a really lovely sentiment to kind of leave as a takeaway.
So that brings us to the end of episode 5. That was absolutely awesome. And Matt, honestly, that was such a pleasure to have you on, buddy. And we'll have to get you on for another episode soon.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been great just spending this time chatting with you about all this sort of stuff. And man, I hope to do it again sometime. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Deconstructing Worship. We hope that you got as much from it as we did. We would absolutely love to have you all involved in these conversations. So please find us at Instagram and YouTube, both under the handle at Deconstructing Worship. And please send in any emails with any questions or anything that you would love involved within any kind of future episodes. And our email is deconstructingworship@gmail.com. And we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.